Matthieu Blazy's debut collection premiered in Paris Fashion Week for Chanel Spring-Summer 2026, and I wanted to share with you my thoughts on the collection, given this is such a prestigious brand steeped in history with so much heritage and established codes. I feel we all want to have our say. So let's get into my head. This is my take over the last 2 days of assimilation. Let's discuss. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Cara. I vlog about all things fashion related with a guilty pleasure on the luxury end of it. Fashion is my therapy, it's my natural high, so if you can relate or would like to indulge with me, then like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell and follow me on our fashion fix together. Right guys, I hope you're all keeping safe and well. Like I said in my intro, it's only been 2 days since the debut collection from Matthieu Blazy for Chanel has premiered at Paris Fashion Week, and I don't usually assimilate and discuss it just 2 days in, but quite a lot of you have DM'd me on Instagram and asked me what are my thoughts. Interestingly, some of you are quite excited to share and discuss, and some of you, most of you actually, have said, I'm quite confused, I'm not sure how I feel, what do you think? Rather than keep my thoughts to myself, which I tend to do until I know what I feel, I think I feel comfortable with where I sit with it. Now bear in mind, this might be a long one. I am going to just introduce you into my head right now. Let's delve into Cara and see where we're at 2 days in. So get something comfortable, sit down, relax, and let's basically delve right into this. Now that Paris Fashion Week has closed, I have to say, not only has it been one of the most highly anticipated fashion weeks of late, it's been the most fabulous for discussions and explosive changes to brands. Now stay tuned, because on my channel I will be sharing my thoughts on other brands, but this one, as you know, is dedicated to Chanel. We're going to deep dive a little bit, guys. You know me, if you don't already, I absolutely love fashion, the history of fashion, interconnecting things that create a vision. Genuinely speaking, I don't tend to judge a collection 2 days after it's come out. We're in its infancy of Chanel. We are very lucky to have a new director to talk about. It's been so long. It's been 10 months since Matthieu took reins of the house over, since December last year, and we have been all anticipating his debut. Now what do we think? Put your comments below as you watch this. I would love to see what you feel as we're going. Now I'm going to start by saying, as somebody who loves Chanel, when I first saw that collection, I was thinking, if only I filmed my live reaction, it would have been quite entertaining, I have to say. There were lots of oohs. When I finished watching it with my other half, I said, let's put it away and I'm going to rewatch it again. So I picked up the phone, called Mum, had a good conversation with her about it, and I will share with you her thoughts because it's very interesting, our takes on it individually. I rewatched it that same evening, and I think on the first night of its launch, Monday, didn't actually go to bed until about 2:30 in the morning because my mind was worrying, as I'm sure everyone's were. I didn't really jump on social media that day. I didn't really want to cloud my own assimilations with anybody else's, especially with a brand I love. I like to see how I feel a good few days later, because we are looking at the creation of another human being's vision portrayed through the biggest lens of all, one of the biggest brands in fashion, Chanel. Now I can imagine the amount of pressure that Matthieu must have had accepting the role, but then realizing, okay, this is a role for Chanel. Chanel is one of the most prestigious fashion brands in the world. It's steeped with history. It's come from one person, a woman, Gabrielle Chanel, an orphan who lived in a convent, who was interested in menswear and masculine, feminine. There's so many facets about the story of Gabrielle Chanel. And then we haven't even discussed Karl. How I will structure my vlog today is I will go with different chapters and you can dive and delve into them in different orders as you wish, but this will be my take. Now I'm going to start with Matthieu Blazy's actual theme of the collection. The theme of any form of art is so integral to that piece of art, whether it's music, fashion or film, because it sets the tone. It's the invisible thread of communication between the creator and the recipient. Now I will pin above the vlog where I talked about the subjectiveness of fashion. If you're interested in that, please go and have a look. This basically stems from the emotional connection towards fashion versus the superficial opinion. When you first see a collection, how do you feel? Now you're very entitled to love or hate something, but for me personally, before I decide whether I love or hate something, I like to understand it, and I think it's very pertinent to fashion and art generally that you do invest some time into the themes, because that's what sets everything. You are usually left to your own devices to decide whether or not this is something for you. Artists will not lay it all out on a table for you. It's not their job to explain their vision all the time in all of the details, because then there's no excitement, there's no wonder. If you're given everything on a plate, as we all are with social media these days, where is the wonder? With film, you usually know the genre of a film and you can read about the theme before you watch something, but you can still decide whether or not you want to watch it and then determine how you feel afterwards. With art, with paintings, you don't necessarily have any theme, but you have a little excerpt about the artist and what they were thinking at the time to delve into their mind. With fashion, the beauty of a artistic director is you only know what they're going to share on the day when the runway is happening. Yes, you've got a couple of brands that might give a little hint here and there on the red carpet, but with Chanel, they were very tight-lipped and it built a huge demand. The correlation between a theme on a painting and a theme in fashion are very similar traits, because as a viewer, you don't actually know what the theme is until it's presented to you, until it becomes yours. Now there is a philosophy that when art is being created, it is theirs, but once they put it out into the public, it is no longer theirs, it is ours. Ours for us to judge, to feel, to discuss, to hate, to love, to like or not. When I first saw the planets, and with the mirrored floor, it looked like they were walking through space. The mirror made some of the half spheres look like planets through the floor. It was kind of dreamlike. I was thinking, is this a galaxy? Are we going to go through a dream? You're seeing oranges and russet reds, almost like a sunset color palette with a blackened, mirrored, lacquered floor. I was thinking this is going to be quite celestial, quite magical, but then I couldn't pair it back to the little giveaway on social media just before, which was the white shirt, the silhouette of the bob cut from the back. I wasn't then connecting what those two were at the time. And then with the music and the lyrics of the songs that were being played, I thought, oh, this is not necessarily a dream. Through reading, Matthieu said that he was interested in Gabrielle Chanel's interest for astrology. So I was thinking, okay, constellations and comets and moons and stars. But we didn't see that on the collections apart from some of the Minaudiers. There was a beautiful galaxy Minaudier globe. Matthieu said that he wanted to look like a universe because his collection was to epitomize that we are all universal. In Matthieu's own words, he has said that when he took the reins of becoming artistic director, according to the Business of Fashion article, which is amazing by the way, he went and had access to the archives, visited the archives twice and never went back, and thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? That showed quite a human side we can all relate to. If you've just started a job that has a huge amount of responsibility and it's your first day, it's like, oh, you know, you do go through that sense of dread when you sometimes take something on that you might feel is a little bit bigger than your initial yes was when you accepted the role. So I like that human aspect of his interview there. He did say that he responds very well to images as opposed to words. So he then started to research more about Gabrielle Chanel and looked at her photographs, and it's through looking at her photographs did he then see one of the core elements of this collection, in my opinion, is when he discovered all of the menswear that Gabrielle was wearing, including the tweeds, including the menswear. She used to wear a lot of menswear when she was very young, and she would probably wear her boyfriend Arthur Capel, otherwise known as Boy, his own clothes. So Matthieu Blazy's first segment of that runway is called Paradox, because he said he focused his collection on Gabrielle Chanel, not Chanel, not the house of Chanel, not the existing codes of Chanel, so to speak, but on the woman, the individual that is Gabrielle. So he focused his attention to detail on what she was like before she even became Chanel. So that's why I believe the Charvet shirt is so iconic in this collection. A series of 3, I would call them workman's shirts, because they're very long, oversized. I absolutely love oversized anyway, but very evocative of the era where the little pin tuck bibs and the collarless, or even with the collar, was so prevalent. Delving further into the story of Gabrielle, it's all about the fact that he took interest in her as a young woman. She wanted to be considered equal to a man. That's why she would wear menswear, but in his words, she also wanted to seduce the man. So the notion of him opening his runway with 2 clear masculine suits followed by look 3, those 3 looks are so important for Matthieu's vision of Gabrielle without the Chanel after it, of her Chanel, before she even found probably what she wanted to do. She was wearing her boyfriend's clothes, as we all do. And further even into that, how deep can I go into this vlog with you? Gabrielle first started to wear menswear at a costume party in the 19-teens. She loved how she felt in it so much that a few days later, it is said that she wore the same outfit or costume again just to go out, and she felt so good about herself. So her love for menswear is now translated into the first segment of Matthieu's collection. And being a huge fan of Chanel, I haven't really seen any clear masculine brown tweed suiting before. Obviously, we know one of the key codes of Chanel is the tweed suit, and the key silhouette of Chanel is the straight body skimming boxy fit just over the knee skirt combination. For looks 1 and 2, we had nothing like that at all. And as with film, the first scene of a film is usually so pertinent to the rest of the film because it can foreshadow what the entire film is about. Now, the same way the first 2 looks of Chanel foreshadowed what the whole collection was about. I understand what I believe has been Matthieu Blazy's direction for this collection. It is him paying a complete homage to Gabrielle, not to Chanel, not to the codes, not to necessarily Karl Lagerfeld Chanel, but to Gabrielle. Keeping with the theme of paradox for the first segment, Matthieu has said that the suits are all designed on the menswear, the love of Gabrielle's menswear dressing. The jackets are more masculine, the strong shoulders, the oversized shoulder. The hems are short, it's slightly cropped, a little bit ripped. The sleeves are rolled, all in the same way of how a man would wear a jacket. This is real home life Gabrielle to me, and as much as I love the legacy that we've seen of Chanel so far, I don't think we've seen this before. And the trousers of look 1, it's low slung, slightly oversized, it's a little bit too big for her, sitting a little bit low. I think that look for me is so cool. And yes, I have seen comments saying, oh, but you can buy that from other brands. How new is that? That's a brown suit. What's so new about that? That is not Chanel. Again, I will delve into my thoughts on that a little bit later, but sticking with the paradox theme, the first segment is all about the masculine side of Gabrielle and her love for menswear. The middle segment of Matthieu's collection is known as Le Jour, otherwise the day, and Matthieu has said that this is all about the separates, the dressing of separate pieces, where in a wardrobe you've got your capsule collection, your staple shirt, cardigan, jumper, trouser, jacket. These are the core capsule pieces of a casual separates wardrobe. It's very important that that flows on now that I understand the paradox side, because if the paradox side is focusing on the introduction of Gabrielle and her love of menswear and suiting shirts, jackets and trousers, then I understand that naturally the middle segment is known as the separates segment, because then once you've got your suit, you're going to want to have a shirt, aren't you? You're going to want to have a nice jumper, or you might want to take the jacket off and have a new blouse. So if you look at the middle segment again, it's all about separates pieces, key pieces that can be picked and chosen into new looks from the first segment. And within this segment is the white shirt. Now, we saw it as a teaser before the collection was live. The story behind that is also very fascinating. It is where Matthieu has formed his first collaboration with a third-party brand. Now, the third-party brand or atelier is known as Charvet. They are one of the most signature brands in Paris for shirting, and Matthieu saw that Gabrielle used to wear boys' clothing. He contacted the original atelier, Charvet, and they said yes, she was a customer of ours and she would buy menswear. So he collaborated, and this is a first for Chanel. And I think it's very interesting because if you know Matthieu Blazy, he is very much about technique, texture, fluidity and movement. Obviously he did for Bottega fringing, and he also dabbled in pom-poms, and I think we do see that throughout the collection in the form of fringed headwear and bags. And I want to bring this back to one of his strengths, which is his attention to detail. And I'm actually foreshadowing a very exciting métier d'art with him. I cannot wait to see what he's going to do with ateliers in Chanel for métier d'art next year. Because he has collaborated with Charvet, it shows that he is willing to introduce things from other ateliers in his ready-to-wear. So if you look at the shirt right at the bottom on the placket, there is a vintage looking label that says in French that this was made by Charvet for Chanel. I also like the vintage element of the cursive Chanel, the script-like logo, which I believe is one of, or probably the original 1920s logo for Gabrielle herself. The back half of Act 2, I will call it Act 2, is where he does start to give us nods to the newer Chanel. The Chanel with the black lines, the architectural Chanel, the cleaner looking Chanel. You are not only seeing the white shirt, but you're seeing a mixture. And what I love about this part of the act is an intermixing of casual looks, formal looks, evening wear looks, all side by side. Usually it's all about the evening wear right at the end and the day wear towards the beginning. And fittingly, because the backdrop is about a universe, a multitude of planets intermixing, then perhaps this is how Matthieu has intermixed his collection, so that in essence, where he's saying he wants to create a wardrobe, as we are viewing it, it's almost like a conveyor belt of a collection where we can stand there and say, oh, I do need a shirt. Oh, look, there's a jacket there. Mind you, I have got an event and I quite like that. I'm not saying we all buy all elements of the brand, but I think his vision is to present that to you, to create more of a wider scope approach and collect more of a wider breadth of customer, as opposed to just one particular customer or one of the key customers of Chanel pre-Matthieu. The final part of the collection is known as Universal, and this is where you're seeing the explosion of color. The final look is probably the most fun look on the whole runway. I actually thought this was a applique skirt, but according to the writings up afterwards, this is Matthieu's new tweed. So he's taken fringing elements, I think it's fringed pieces of chiffon in all of those colors, and created this fluid but also this three-dimensional tweed that has such movement. When that absolutely incredible supermodel closed it off, it was phenomenal. I think it was one of my favorite skirts of the whole runway. It's just so much fun, and it evoked a lot of sense of wonder for me, because as I said, I wasn't sure what the fabric was, and I would love to see it in real life. But I just think now that I hear that it's his new tweed, I mean, there's so many new tweeds in the collection, but to call this a tweed, it's so innovative, and I'm quite excited about that, to be honest with you. The third act ties it all together with the set and the backdrop. It's all about the entire accolade of the women, the plural, not the woman. And fittingly, the interview that I've referred to earlier is where Matthieu said when he first joined and he was thinking about ideas, he said we can go one of two ways. We can either go House of Codes and do a true Chanel show, or we can act as if this is our last. And he said he went with the second option, and the person he was talking to said, what next? What after that? And he said, then we start again. So I love the fact that, in my opinion, this collection, which I haven't yet said how I feel about it, but it excites me because from a director's viewpoint who has just stepped into probably the most hardest shoes to fill, we're talking Gabrielle Chanel shoes and Karl Lagerfeld shoes, I think he has taken a very confident stance with his vision. I think he would have been open to criticism if he went the other way or the way he did, because there is such a huge emphasis placed on the house of Chanel and the codes of Chanel and what Chanel is, or what Chanel is to us. And I admire a director like Matthieu, because I feel like he said, I don't really care what you all think, I'm going to do my vision for the brand. And just like when Karl Lagerfeld was new in his tenure of Chanel, he was open to a lot of criticism also, but look what happened to Karl. He is considered Chanel, isn't he? In 1971, Gabrielle Chanel passed away, and that was a time where Chanel as a brand was dwindling, struggling. If you think of the era of the time, the 70s, the beginning of the 70s, post-war, we've already had the rise of the 1960s, the swinging 60s, the suits, the boucle tweed suits, the color blocking, and the iconic Chanel silhouette. Now, join me 12 years later, where we have Karl Lagerfeld stepping in as the new artistic director for Chanel. Bearing in mind, between 71 and 83, there was no director. It was designed by the house. Now, Karl revolutionized Chanel with his vision. Remember, now we're in 1983, effectively missing the whole of the 70s. He brought it back to what it needed to be, but he didn't digress away from the house too far. In the 80s, he did collections pulling together inspiration from Gabrielle Chanel's looks from the 20s and the 30s, so it was all still very much woven into his vision, but it was his vision. Another vision of his is he didn't want to do the pastel suits. He didn't want to do the coordinating pastel 60s suits. This is one of the most strongest codes that Chanel had in the 60s, and he did away with them. He wasn't going to do that. That wasn't Karl, that was Gabrielle. As a huge fan of the 80s, he brought in his own look, and it was about power dressing and real masculinity on the shoulders. He took the length of the skirt, where Chanel was not a fan of above the knee skirts, and he went into mini skirts for couture. He wanted to do away with the Chanel colors. In fact, he's known to be saying that Chanel did beige, but I will keep that for winter. So for his 1983 debut couture collection, the color palette was black, white, red and navy. Now obviously we all know that we've had 36 wonderful years of Karl Lagerfeld's Chanel. Then when he passed away in 2019, we had Virginie Viard, who then stepped in straight away within the same year, so there was no gap, and she continued the helm of Chanel until last year, June 2024. 1971, Gabrielle Chanel passed away. The brand was dwindling and in need of revitalization. A new director came 12 years later and revolutionized it in his own way, deliberately stepping away from certain key codes of the house, creating his own new codes and becoming one of the legends in fashion's history today. Karl Lagerfeld passed away in 2019. Virginie Viard took over the helm until 2024. 2024, there was a lot of buzz that the brand is in need of change, that the brand needs to be lifted, we need someone new. Then the sudden departure of Virginie Viard in June last year, 2024, and the new appointment of Matthieu Blazy in December. Now Matthieu Blazy's debut collection has been totally different to the Chanel that we know. The Chanel that Karl took over was totally different to the Chanel that they knew back then. In the same way that Karl Lagerfeld was hired to revolutionize Chanel, he did face a lot of criticism and he turned it around, did what he wanted. He didn't care necessarily that they were losing certain codes, and look at the legend that he became. And I think what I'm trying to say is that Matthieu Blazy's only just started. Now the comparison is so similar. You've got two very distinct timelines in Chanel's history, 1971 and 2024, where the brand was written about as needing a time for change, it needing revitalization, something new to lift the brand. When Karl did it in 1983, he faced a lot of controversy, doing away with key codes such as the pastels, the 60s silhouette with the below the knee, and introducing bolder shapes, the bigger shoulders, and the mini skirt. In a similar way, Matthieu Blazy has taken over from Virginie Viard last year, when again the brand was considered in need of a lift, and he has introduced his colors, different colors to what we were used to seeing with Karl. In the same way, Karl introduced different colors to what we were used to seeing with Gabrielle. In terms of a color shift, both Karl and Matthieu have done their own thing and not necessarily followed the original codes of color that we're used to, but both directors also took upon themselves to do new silhouettes. Fashion is evolutionary. It is also cyclic. You could say that every 30 years fashion comes back again. We've already had the huge resurgence of the 80s 10 years ago, and now we're currently having a huge resurgence of the 90s. In the same way where Karl did away with 60s pastel colors, we did see more 60s pastel colors later on in his tenure. He was the director of Chanel for 36 years. So as I said, fashion evolves every 30 years. You could argue it came back again. What are we going to see with Matthieu? He's already introduced new colors. I was looking for the black and white. Where were they? They were in the middle of the runway. So we can go on and on about the parallels. I think this is very important though, because where there are a lot of people judging Matthieu for the colors, for it not being Chanel, for it not being the Chanel that we're used to, I don't think Karl Lagerfeld would have faced anything different when he did his debut in 1983 for couture. He would have been told, that's not Chanel, that's not the colors, that's how could you even do a mini skirt, you know? Think about it. Fundamentally, what I want to say here is that when Karl took over, this was Karl's Chanel. It was no longer Gabrielle's Chanel. He made reverent references to her buttons and of course to tweed, but he introduced his shapes and his colors, and what comes with a new director is a new vision, a new energy, and also new themes following the same code doesn't always mean that's the right thing to do. Fast forward to Matthieu Blazy. He's using his Chanel vision. He's referencing Gabrielle a lot in this runway, less so on Karl, because he's also said to say that that was Karl's vision, but this is his vision. Let's talk about codes. The definition of what is a house code. A code, generally speaking, is a term used to identify a connotation to do with a product or a brand. Now with Chanel, we have established that key factors of the brand, such as black and white, tweeds, buttons, bows, pearls, toe-capped slingback shoes, the 2.55 bag, the classic flap. These are all key codes of Chanel. Now there are, in my opinion, something known as subcodes. So subcodes will be not the core codes, but equally as important, but a second priority, such as the silhouette, the 60s suit from Gabrielle Chanel, the pastel colors, denim in spring, pink knitwear in spring. These are all key codes that as a company, as Chanel, need to cover all of these things from a strategic point of view. A, because these are things that they're known for. B, because they know customers want them. C, because they like to create the demand and restrict the amount of units that they make and bring it forward later on. So codes are very important, not just for a consumer to feel that they are belonging to something, that they understand a brand, but codes are also very strategically placed in brands to make the customer desire to want to have them. My opinion about fashion codes, because I work in the industry, I think it's very dated. I don't think we need to refer to things as codes of Chanel. We can just consider them as key features of a brand, but if we refer to them as a code, we are limiting what we determine as right for us from that brand. We are creating a level of expectation that if a brand doesn't carry their key codes in a collection, then where are they going with this collection? You almost are telling yourself that I'm going to follow this code, and if someone is doing things on the side, then that's automatically deemed blurring of the lines and not right. And I'm seeing a lot of incensed people talking about how this is not Chanel, this is not the codes of Chanel, where are the codes of Chanel? But guys, if we do talk codes, they are right there in the runway. They're not made obvious. Yes, there is a black and white looks in the middle of the runway. There is a black jacket with camellias at the bottom. There is a tweed. We've even got the new tweed from at the end, the last look from Matthieu with the explosive looking, in my opinion, flowers. If we don't follow the codes, think about this. Think about your life. You're following what you currently believe is the course of your life. Whether you believe you're on the right path or not, you're definitely on a path. But then you don't know what avenue is going to come off of this road that you're on right now and what might be on that side. So you might think that you're on a current path, i.e. your own code, and you're feeling comfortable, or you understand that this is where you are. But then there might be a tangent over there or over there that you might approach later in your life, and you might be, pleasantly surprised that, I didn't realize this was going to be in my life, and I quite like the idea of that. Or not. You probably say, actually, that's a decision I don't want, and you go this way. It's the same philosophy, and I wanted to just put that bit in here because where I see a lot of people saying that this is not my Chanel and this is not following the codes and what was he doing, I definitely think you need to remember that when Karl Lagerfeld started in 1983, certainly it wasn't Gabrielle's code to have a mini skirt in her collection. I mean, she's probably thinking at the time, what is he doing? But also it was the 1980s, so it was very relevant. And Matthieu Blazy is in 2025, and his new way is also very relevant. Matthieu Blazy is doing what I believe his new codes. I'm not saying he's not referenced previous codes at all. No, of course he has. We've got gold buttons from Gabrielle Chanel's 20s and 30s on his jackets. We have tweeds. He's even developed a new tweed that looks like Weetabix in his words. Then you've got the spikes of natural wheat looking sheaths coming off of the bodice to make it look like dry wheat, because he knew that Gabrielle was so involved in natural fibers. Of course, she loved tweed. She brought menswear fabrics into women's wear, didn't she, in the 20s? He's most certainly referenced codes of Gabrielle and codes of Karl with the black and white, but he's also introduced, and I really do think you need to give him a long rope, because he's allowed to introduce his own codes. There's no, pardon the pun, but there's no black line that tells anyone that they can't colour outside of the box. We don't want to be confined in our life in any way. Certainly with fashion and art, fashion is naturally a freedom of speech. It's your individual style. If you choose to want to wear head-to-toe Chanel, especially the ones with all of the big CCs on the products, go right ahead. That's you do you. But if you're someone like my mother, and I must share with you her opinions about the collection later on, she doesn't like the obvious CCs. She's more of a quiet luxury, so you won't really see her wear all of the big CC in her collection. We're all very different, and I don't believe that we need to live by the rule of following certain codes, because fashion is evolutionary, and as the world evolves, and as we get older, as Matthieu gets older, he then will develop and evolve his style. He will then leave, and someone will then come, and they will create their own codes, and the cycle goes on. This is why I say it's cyclic. Fashion is a cycle. It comes and it goes, and it peaks and it troughs, and we all talk about it. It's designed to shock. Fashion, if it's not going to shock you enough to talk about, then what else is there exciting in the world? Fashion is a whole heap of culture. It's influence from people from the past, and I'm really embracing the fact that he is here with his new codes, because this is his Chanel. Well, I have to tell you, this is a very refreshing change. I am accepting of the change. This is a new director with new visions, new blood, new codes, if we have to say the codes again. He has respectfully referenced history, but I don't think that history is necessarily the pertinent focus on his collection. He wants to create for Chanel women, not the Chanel woman. And actually, there was a very lovely comment that someone wrote on one of the many social media platforms I've seen lately. They said, "I love it's actually a wearable collection for those of us that are not hyper feminine." I think that's so relevant, because there were a couple of models that really owned their look, and they weren't your traditional feminine looking model. They had an androgynous feel, particularly in look 75. She looks so cool. You've got elements of femininity in here, masculinity. I love the fact that the collection opened with masculinity as opposed to the traditional femininity. Perhaps my first two favorite looks are looks 1 and 2, because it's so different. Yes, you could say that other brands do these kind of suits, but so what? This is Chanel doing the suit. I hear you that you'll say, well, I don't really want to pay Chanel prices for those suits when I can get the same kind of thing in another brand far cheaper. That's all correct as well. You can, and you probably will. I don't know what the price points are of these pieces at all, but what I'm trying to say is I appreciate the new look. I appreciate the fact that Matthieu hasn't gone to fill the shoes of Karl. He didn't do a super huge production like Karl. He didn't do lots of black and white like Karl. He didn't do a lot of 60s suits like Gabrielle. He went straight back to young Gabrielle, and I love the fact that he is showing us different heritage facts from Gabrielle's legacy that probably we didn't even know about, or we would never have seen in reality. I knew that she loved menswear, and I knew she wore menswear, but I never thought that we were missing elements of men's tailoring in Chanel until I saw the first two looks. When that first look came out, I was like, okay, this is going to be different. I love the fact that those trousers are slightly oversized. I love the fact that the jacket is cropped. I don't really reach for crop things. This cardigan is from 24C Cruise. It is a top buttoned cardigan, and it opens into a open front. It is cropped with lovely trims here, and I tried this on in turquoise, but this is what I mean. This is traditional Chanel, isn't it? This is the code of Chanel, the monochrome. These buttons are traditional code of Chanel, but the shape, the croppedness, this is Virginie Viard for Chanel. This is not Gabrielle, this is not Karl, and that's what I'm saying. Matthieu will be considered Matthieu for Chanel. It won't be Matthieu hasn't done a Karl version because he's not Karl. So this is my souvenir from Virginie Viard's Chanel, and that's why I'm wearing it for this vlog. I also saw someone say that this isn't Chanel as we know it, and whilst they love the pieces, this is not the Chanel that is the Chanel, and they continue to say that Chanel should be pretty. I actually disagree. I don't think Chanel is only pretty. Yes, you've got the pinks, the pastels, the dusty pastels, the blue denim, that's all sweet and pretty, and then you've got the traditional tweed suits with the plaited trims. That's all very beautiful and very ladylike, and what I would class as a sub code and not a primary code. But I feel that we have got the femininity in this collection through the level of fluidity, guys. The amount of fluid skirts, there's a lot of woven t-shirts used from fabrics that are used to make hosiery, so they must be so delicate, and then it's paired with a tiered skirt. As you move, your leg kicks out the frills, and it's very flamenco, very Spanish looking, and I feel that those skirts, I mean, I've seen them before in Chanel 23B, I think, as well, the black one, absolutely gorgeous. I tried it on. So there are a lot of timeless pieces in here. I'm just looking at the other looks. What else do I like? Like I said, I like the cropped boxy jackets on looks 1, 2 and 5. It'll be interesting to see how they're going to be priced. I love the fact that the roll-up sleeve has got a little mini CC on the striped lining. I quite liked look 12, the black and white dress. It looked like a really casual throw-on dress, and Matthieu has said before that Chanel's style of being kind of bric-a-brac, throw-on, quite casual. It's quite wearable. It evokes a lot of just casual styling, and I love the black and white concept there. Where was that white sheath dress? 52, absolutely love that, can see that on the red carpet. In terms of the deconstructed or crumpled 2.55 bag, now I've seen a couple of things. So I think on the first look they do bring it out in a leather version, and Matthieu has woven metal into the leather so that you can squash it under your arm. When you grab it, it retains the shape as you crumple it. Whether I would even want that in my collection, probably not, but I like the message he's sending there. I mean, you can see it different ways. In his words, he said it's more of a loved up bag rather than kind of a bag that you just wear daintily on your shoulder. They had metal ones as well. Personally, I'm not really a fan of the metal ones. I mean, how heavy will those be? Quite like the black tipping oversized coat on look 30. And then in terms of the shoes, between my mum and I, we absolutely love the looks of these shoes. My particular favorite are the ones with the toe cap with the, looks like it's elastic on the back of the heel, so the leather looks so soft, and they are cut quite high on your foot, so it looks like your whole foot's going to look quite slim and hugged. The other shoe I quite liked are the ones with the retro contrast stripe trim, for example the one on look 48 and 50 and 51. I'm quite interested to see the shoes, if I'm honest. I think there's a lot more timeless classics coming through on the shoes. As for the bags, I think one of the most popular bags will be the one that I'm pinning here. I think this is the same shape as the classic flap, and he's just made it with a leather strap, removed the quilting, which I think is quite fresh. It's different, certainly quite youthful as well. And then you've got an embossed CC. In fact, that's probably the first time I'm remembering the larger CC in this whole collection. Most of it is quite dainty and minuscule, so that could be one of his new codes. The one thing I am not a fan of, until I try it on, I mean, I like to say these things, but when you see them up close, you're like, okay, change my mind. But it's all of the tweed jackets with the really rounded arms. Look 64, 65. Not really my favorite shape for me. I'm quite short with shorter arms, so I don't think that will do me any justice. It would probably swamp me, but I do appreciate the fact that you've got the oversized proportion on the top and then the slimmer on the skirt. Looks 72 and 73 is where Matthieu Blazy calls them his two Chanel ladies. I believe these are stretch tweed. It's see-through open weave, quite interesting. And then, as I've said before, number 75, the model just owned that look. I loved her walk as well. So cool. I don't believe Chanel should just be considered as being pretty. It's so cool. Of all of these looks on ready to wear, my favorite one is... There's two. Well, it's the last one, number 77, but my absolute favorite look is this one, number 56. Black and white, guys. You've got the feathers. Just look how she moves. Look at the video. That skirt comes to life. Feathers, when they're so dainty, they come to life. And I love the idea of quite a classic woven blouse. Be interesting to see how much that will be. But generally speaking, the color element for me is new. They're not really my favorite colors, and I'm very interested to see how 26P is going to evolve, because that will also be an opportunity to see some denim. It's obviously spring. This is quite, in all honesty, a sunset color palette, very autumnal, very transitional. He's played it very clever because of the color palette being how it is. For a debut collection, it can appeal to quite a lot more people, and again, he has said he wants to cater for different regions of customers. So I guess where there is always a huge focus on Europe, it's quite nice that he has created an all-round color palette that can appeal to everyone. Let me share with you what my mother has to say about this collection, because if you do follow my channel, if you don't, please do, because I love fashion, but I wouldn't have loved fashion if it wasn't for my mum. And if you do follow me, you will see her here and there in some of my vlogs. My mum is the original fashionista in my life. I didn't start this. It was all for my mum. She was originally a fashion designer. I grew up watching her sketch, design, consult, pattern cut, fit, sew, retweak, remake. It was really lovely to see that and be exposed to that when I was in my formative years. So seeing mum flourish in something that she loves and still loves is where I developed my passion for it. So this is what she said when I called her after the first watch. When I first watched the collection, I was a bit like, I don't know how I feel. I think there's certain bits I like, but what do you think? This is more for you, really. She absolutely was a breath of fresh air, and I asked her to write it down because I wanted to share it with you. So this is what she said. Wow, I love the collection. It is refreshing and wearable. Not everyone wants to wear an emblazoned branded collection, and sometimes it is just nice to wear a brand, and I am not advertising it. It is subtle in parts and chic. I love the colours and the styles. It reminds me of a young Gabrielle before Chanel. The classic four-pocket styles are very much Chanel, but the big white shirt is so casual without a huge logo that it is almost innocent and free. Some say it is just a white shirt, but no. It was designed by a brand that Gabrielle would buy for, with the Chanel logo added on top. It is a collaboration with a special atelier, Charvet, where Chanel would purchase for her beau. Classy and in its simplicity. I love the collection and it is very wearable. How many four-pocket pieces of clothing do we need? And do you know what? She's absolutely right. When you have certain staples in your wardrobe, do you need any more? How many does one need? How many pieces of denim do I need in my collection? And I absolutely adore denim. It's not just about the fit for me, it's about the wash. But what I love about what my mum said is she loves colour, whereas I don't really wear that much colour. She loves the red skirt, for example, and she loves the element of red in this collection. In fact, there are so many times that I've heard my mum say, why isn't there enough red in fashion? Red isn't necessarily a all season, all year round colour. Unfortunately, that's how it's looked at in the industry. Red is usually seen as a trend colour, but there are so many people that love red, and even because of her love for red, I'm starting to love red a lot more as well. So I love the fact that my mother can see the beauty in this collection. We're totally two different age groups, and she probably sees more about the wearability in this collection than I am, and she's seeing more opportunity for her to buy into this than previous collections, for example. So that kind of epitomizes Matthieu Blazy's synopsis, where he wanted to create a wardrobe for all Chanel women, not woman. I love that someone can look at this collection and pick anything out and it would suit them. It's a broader appeal collection, but I think it's done cleverly, carefully. I think it'd probably be quite successful for the brand. The only thing I'm interested to see now are what they're going to do to that deconstructed 2.55 in reality, and how much these pieces are going to be, because when you do create more separates, it is going to be interesting to see how accessible it's going to be if they want to grow widthways with more customers. So with that said, I think I have covered pretty much everything I wanted to say today. Are you still watching from the beginning? Put a yes below, then I know if you've watched to the end. But let me know what you think, guys. What do you think of the debut collection? What are your thoughts? Has your thoughts changed from the beginning to seeing it first until now? I've tried to share with you a lot of the insights that I've read from Matthieu himself. I hope you found this helpful, useful, and let me know what you think. Until then, guys, take care, and I will see you soon. Bye.